stop everything right now because the Minkyo timeline that fans have been quietly assembling for years has just been completed, and when you see every chapter laid out from the very beginning to the marriage that the whole world now knows about, you are going to understand why this community never stopped believing even when the evidence was thin and the skeptics were loud and the story seemed to be moving too slowly for anyone outside the fandom to take seriously. From the first documented moment they occupied the same space to the Tuesday morning proposal in the kitchen to the registered marriage to baby Juno sleeping against his father's chest while the seaweed soup simmered, this timeline is not a fan theory. It is a documented record of one of the most quietly extraordinary love stories that Korean entertainment has ever produced. And the details inside it that nobody was paying attention to when they happened are the details that now make everything make sense. Like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on post notifications because Minkyo timeline content is arriving and you cannot afford to miss a single chapter. Now let us walk through the whole story. Minkyo fans, settle in completely. Because what we are about to do together is not the usual format of Minkyo content. It is not a single moment or a single gesture or a single confirmed development examined with the depth and the care that this community brings to the individual pieces of this story. It is the whole thing. The complete arc. From the first barely noticed overlap to the marriage that stands as the confirmed and permanent and irrevocable reality of where they are now. Laid out in sequence. With every connection between every chapter made visible in the way that chronological perspective makes visible, which is to say the specific and sometimes devastating clarity of hindsight that shows you exactly how each thing led to the next and how the whole story was moving in the same direction from the very beginning even when nobody outside this community could see where it was going. The Minkyo timeline is not a love story that arrived suddenly. It is a love story that built. Slowly and quietly, and with a specific and deliberate patience of two people who understood that what they were building was worth taking the time to build correctly. The timeline is the evidence of that building. And the completed version, with every chapter present and every connection visible, is the most comprehensive and the most moving document in the entire Minkyo archive. Let us walk through every piece of it together and let us feel what the full picture contains. The beginning of the timeline is earlier than most people know, and the earliness of it is one of the first things that the completed version reveals with a force that the community finds both startling and deeply meaningful. The official public narrative of when Lee Minho and Song Hye-kyo's story began has always been anchored to the dates that public documentation confirmed. But the Minkyo community's careful archival work has established that the real beginning, the first moment of genuine and significant connection between them as individuals rather than as industry figures occupying a shared professional world, predates those publicly anchored dates by enough time to change the entire character of the story. They were in the same space before the world knew they were in the same space. At an industry gathering of the specific and genuinely private kind that Korean entertainment periodically produces, the kind that does not generate press coverage because its entire value to its attendees is the absence of press coverage, Lee Minho and Song Hye-kyo were introduced. Not for cameras, not for any audience, simply by a mutual friend who thought they would find each other interesting. The introduction lasted 15 minutes by Song Hye-kyo's own subsequent account. He found it unforgettable. She found it pleasant and then did not think about it again. The asymmetry of that initial impact is the first chapter of the timeline, and it contains within it, in compressed form, the entire emotional structure of everything that followed. He was already in it. She was not yet. The distance between those two positions is what the rest of the timeline narrates the closing of. The second chapter of the timeline is the first contact attempt, which Lee Minho made approximately 2 weeks after the initial introduction, and which Song Hye-kyo declined with a specific and clear and completely genuine politeness of someone who is not in a state of availability for what is being offered, and who knows it about herself with the clear-eyed self-awareness that her particular moment in her own reconstruction required. The no was real. It was not a test. It was not strategic. It was Song Hye-kyo at a specific and honest point in her own interior journey communicating accurately about where she was. He received it with the grace that the Minkyo community has come to understand as one of the most defining and most admirable qualities of his pursuit, which is complete and unhurried acceptance of her stated truth without any attempt to reframe it or negotiate around it, or make his acceptance conditional on any future change in her position. He accepted the no. He gave her space. And he stayed. The The Staying is the third chapter, and it is the longest chapter in the timeline, and the one that the community engages with most carefully because it is the chapter where Lee Minho's character reveals itself most completely, and where the foundation of everything that was eventually built between them was quietly and steadily being laid. The Staying did not look like anything from the outside. That is the point. It did not look like romantic pursuit because it had no visible activity attached to it. It looked like a man going about his life, making his professional choices, doing his work, existing in the broad shared world of Korean entertainment that inevitably brought him into the same social atmosphere as Song Hye-kyo without ever pressing against the boundary she had established. The Staying was internal. It was the sustained and private maintenance of a feeling and a regard for a specific person that required no external validation and no progress reports and no timeline of its own. He simply continued to feel what he felt about her, without requiring it to go anywhere, without conditioning it on any outcome. The Staying is what separates what Lee Minho did from ordinary romantic persistence, which is typically directed toward an outcome and therefore loses its quality of grace when the outcome is delayed. His Staying was not directed toward an outcome. It was simply the honest state of a man who had encountered someone he found extraordinary, and who was willing to let that finding exist without demanding anything of it. The Minkyo community has been sitting with the Staying chapter of the timeline since Song Hye-kyo's own accounts of this period first reached the public record. It is the chapter that tells them the most about who he is. The fourth chapter is the indirect presence, which is the period that Song Hye-kyo later described as the time when she began noticing things that seemed like coincidences but that revealed themselves over time as something more deliberate and more caring. The causes supported by anonymous donations that corresponded to things she had publicly expressed caring about. The resources and connections that appeared through mutual channels at moments when she was navigating specific professional challenges. The security that materialized during a difficult paparazzi situation. The medical appointment that opened for her mother at exactly the right time. These interventions, each small and each entirely deniable as anything other than coincidence, form a pattern that the Minkyo community has mapped with a thoroughness it brings to all pattern recognition. And the pattern they form is of a man who has found a way to be useful to someone he loves without making his usefulness a claim on her attention or her gratitude. He was helping from a distance. Not to earn anything. Not to create obligation. Because seeing her navigate difficulty when he was in a position to make the difficulty slightly less difficult was something he was simply not capable of declining to do. The fourth chapter is about the specific quality of love that gives without keeping any account of the giving. And the Minkyo community receives it as one of the most important chapters in the entire timeline because it demonstrates the quality of Lee Minho's love at its most essential and its least contaminated by any consideration of return. The fifth chapter is the European Film Festival. The turning point. The moment that Song Hye-kyo has described as the first time she saw Lee Minho clearly, which is to say the first time she was in a state of sufficient interior clarity to receive accurately what had been present and available for years. They were at the same festival for different projects. They were at the same hotel. They ended up at the same dinner. They were seated next to each other. And they talked. Really talked. In the specific and extended and mutually engaged way that Song Hye-kyo later described as producing the first genuine feeling of intellectual and emotional connection with another person that she had experienced in years. He had matured in the time since the initial introduction. Or perhaps she had arrived at the point of being able to see the maturity that had always been there. Either way, the dinner conversation lasted for hours and ended with neither of them ready for it to end. The walk back to the hotel. The coffee the following morning. The honest conversation over that coffee in which he told her about the therapy and the work on himself and the anonymous interventions and everything he had been doing in the year since her rejection. And the confession. I love you and I think I have loved you since the night we met and I will probably always love you even if you never love me back. The fifth chapter of the Minkyo timeline is the confession chapter. And it is the chapter that the community has always known was the axis on which everything else turned. The sixth chapter is the careful beginning. Song Hye-kyo's yes was not immediate and not unqualified, and this is the part of the timeline that the community holds with particular respect because it demonstrates something about both of them that matters enormously. She told him she needed to think. She told him she was scared. She told him she could not promise anything but that she was willing to explore what might be possible if they moved slowly. He agreed. Immediately. Without resentment or pressure. He said he was not going anywhere. And they began. Phone calls first. Text messages. The building of genuine knowledge of each other through conversation before physical proximity complicated anything. This is the chapter where the foundation was actually constructed. Not in the dramatic European festival confession, but in the weeks of calls and messages that followed it. In the specific and patient and unhurried process of two people learning each other across the full range of their actual interior selves rather than across the filtered and managed versions that public life makes default. The careful beginning is the chapter where Minkyo became real in the specific sense of two people deliberately choosing to build something rather than simply falling into the romantic circumstances that proximity and chemistry had provided. They chose to build. The 6th chapter is the building. The 7th chapter is the first official date, which happened 2 months after the European festival, and which both principals have described as having a specific quality of familiar ease that neither of them expected to find in a first romantic encounter. The foundation of friendship and genuine knowledge built through the preceding weeks of careful conversation made the physical occasion of the date feel less like a beginning and more like a confirmation of something already established. They knew each other. The dinner was two people who knew each other finding out what knowing each other felt like when it was in a room rather than on a phone. Felt by all accounts exactly right. The 7th chapter is short in the timeline because what matters about it is not its duration but its quality. It confirmed for both of them that the careful building of the preceding months had produced something solid enough to support whatever came next. And what came next was the private development phase. The 8th chapter is the private year, and it is the chapter that most closely resembles what the Minkyo community was observing from the outside during its earliest and most evidence-scarce period of building this ship. The relationship developed privately and completely out of public view for over a year. Both principals were adamant about this. They met at each other's homes. They told only the closest circle of trusted family and friends. They protected the developing relationship from the weight of public attention with a specific and total commitment of two people who understood, from hard personal experience on both sides, what public attention does to private things that are not yet fully formed. The Minkyo community was out there during this chapter, carefully reading the evidence that leaked through the privacy despite their best efforts, building the archive of indirect observation that would eventually become the foundation of the community's understanding of this pairing. The community was right about what it was seeing during this chapter. What it was seeing was real. The 8th chapter is the private year in which the real thing was built before the world knew it existed. The 9th chapter is the going public, which happened after more than a year of private development, and which both Minho and Song Hye-kyo have described as a decision made from a position of complete security in what they had built rather than from any external pressure or strategic timing. They were ready. The relationship was solid enough to hold public weight. And they confirmed it. The public response exceeded expectations in both positive and negative directions, which Song Hye-kyo has spoken about with a specific and clear-eyed equanimity of someone who processed the possibility of both before the decision was made. The positive response was overwhelming and beautiful. The negative commentary hurt sometimes. But the foundation was too solid to be shaken by it. The 9th chapter is the public confirmation. The moment the Minkyo community's years of careful observation were validated by the principals themselves. The moment before and after in this community's history. The 10th chapter is the proposal. The Tuesday morning in the kitchen. The ring from the drawer. The words about the ordinary Tuesday mornings being the whole answer to every question his life had asked him. He said yes twice. The 10th chapter is the pivot point between what they were building and what they have built. It is the chapter where the careful and patient and completely genuine work of the preceding years arrived at its most formal and its most irreversible expression. Yes, she answered. The 10th chapter is one of the most beautiful things in the entire Minkyo timeline, and the community has held it with the reverence it deserves since the details first arrived. The 11th chapter is the marriage registration and the wedding. Private. Protected. Conducted with the same quality of principled privacy that has characterized every significant chapter of this story. Mr. and Mrs. Lee. The first photographs. The ordinary Tuesday of their confirmed reality beginning. The community received the confirmed photographs with a specific and layered emotion of people who had been building toward this confirmation for years and who found, in the images, exactly what they always believed the inside of Minkyo looked like. Ordinary, real, warm, completely theirs. The 12th chapter is Baby Juno and everything that arrived with him. The postpartum care. The seaweed soup. The kitchen at 5:30 in the morning. The father on the floor with the baby when nobody was watching. The mother with the at-rest face. The postpartum period chapter is the chapter where the Minkyo story moved from the romantic register into something broader and more complete, the register of a family. Of two people who built something together that has now produced a third person who will carry traces of both of them into the future in the specific and irreplaceable way that children carry their parents forward. The 12th chapter is the family chapter, and it is ongoing. The completed Minkyo timeline, laid out in its 12 chapters with every connection between them visible and every progression from one to the next traced, is the most compelling document in the fandom's history because it demonstrates something that individual moments in the story, however significant, cannot demonstrate on their own. It demonstrates inevitability. Not the inevitability of a story that was always going to go this way because fate or destiny required it, which would be a romantic reading that neither Lee Minho nor Song Hye-kyo's individual characters would support. The inevitability of two specific people, making specific and chosen decisions at every junction in the story, arriving at a specific and built and thoroughly earned outcome because they were both, consistently and patiently and without any external pressure, choosing in the same direction. Every chapter of the timeline is a choice. His choice to stay through the no. Her choice to begin the careful building after the European festival. Their shared choice to protect the private year. His choice to propose on a Tuesday morning with the words that reached her completely. Her choice to say yes twice. Baby Juno's chapter begins with all the choices that preceded it. The timeline is 12 chapters of choosing. And the choosing, laid out in sequence with every connection visible, is the love story. Not just the outcome. The whole love story. From co-stars to soulmates. From the 15-minute introduction to the registered marriage to the kitchen at 5:30 in the morning. The whole beautiful thing. The Minkyo community that built this archive and maintained this timeline across all its chapters, through the years of thin evidence and loud skepticism and patient faith, deserves to be named as what it actually is. Not just a fan community. The first and most devoted readers of a story that is now available in its complete form. They saw it clearly from the beginning. They held it carefully through the middle. And they are receiving the completed version with a specific and wholly earned emotion of people who have been right about something that mattered for a very long time. Tell me which chapter of the Minkyo timeline hit you the hardest in the comments right now. Was it the staying? The European festival confession? The Tuesday morning proposal? The seaweed soup? Or the moment you first believed in this ship before any of the major confirmations had arrived? Drop every thought and every feeling and every memory of when you first understood what you were watching below. Like this video. Share it with every Minkyo fan who deserves to see the whole story laid out in its complete and beautiful and completely earned form. Subscribe to this channel because the Minkyo story is alive and ongoing and we are going to be here for every chapter that comes next together.